Hello everybody and welcome back to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. It is nice to be back. I need to remember how to host a podcast after a few days off. I say a few days, probably 5 days off actually, during this international break, this boring October international break before Nottingham Forest return to the City grounds and play Crystal Palace. It is about a week's time, next Monday, so we are eagerly anticipating that. But before we talk about that game and everything else this week, we thought we would do something slightly different and something during this international break. We are going to rate each player that has played for Forest so far this season. Bit of a disclaimer, we've not got a whole list of everybody that's made an appearance or every academy player that might have come on in the cup games or been on the bench. We've kind of selected around 21 players that have kind of been not instrumental but have featured often, shall we say, for Forest, and we shall rate them. No better man to do that and to join me on this episode than the one and only Mark Turner. Mark, good to see you. Hair and makeup have been working on your hair as well, mate. You look good.
Why do I do this? Why do I expose myself to you, you young whippersnapper? You little dick. Hello, mate. So congratulations. First and foremost, congratulations on your run and all the money you raised for charity. And mate, for charity, mate. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, 1 hour 53 minutes for the Manchester half marathon.
That was decent too. It surprised me.
Yeah, decent time. Shin splints got me on the last couple of kilometres. I was hoping for kind of 1 hour 45, but there we go. Still a good time, still under 2 hours. And most importantly, at £1,400 raised for Footprints in Nottingham. Brilliant charity and some lovely money that will do God's work simply and will look after children and their families. So yeah, thank you everybody for the donations. Mark, thanks as well. We think, you donated. So thank you for that. And I know a lot of the listeners and things donated, so we really appreciate it. Honestly, from me and the charity, it means an awful lot. Anyway, enough of me bragging about telling everyone I've done the half marathon. I've been telling everyone for the past few days, I can't walk up these stairs because I did the half marathon, if you didn't know. Enough of me making...
You're too young for my joke. My joke now would be half marathon. I can knock one of those. I can knock a whole one back, no trouble. But of course, you're too young to remember when Snickers used to be called Marathon.
I was just
did you even know that?
I thought it was a Mars bar. I'm not going to lie. I thought a marathon was a Mars bar.
Nope, that's what Snickers used to be back in the day. So all of our older viewers and listeners will appreciate that joke, or not. So anyway, let's get to the business at hand.
Yeah, enough of your old jokes. Let's rate some players. And well, actually, first of all, Mark, just quickly before we start almost rating players.
Yeah.
We sit in this international break. It's a bit of a funny time in October. We've got a big week coming up with Crystal Palace and then Leicester away. They're two big games, really. They're not going to be easy, of course, but Forest have had a great start to the season, some would argue. I mean, how are you feeling in this international break and obviously with the big week ahead as well?
Yeah, I mean, I remain bullish. I've been very excited by how Forest have started the season, and it feels like the pundits are finally starting to come around as well. I was watching the latest episode of Stick to Football yesterday, and Ian Wright was waxing lyrical. In fact, Roy Keane was giving him a bit of a hard time because he wouldn't stop talking about Nuno and the players we've got, and Wrighty was even name-checking some of our fringe players like Jota and Sosa, and saying how much he likes the development of the squad. So no, I'm excited, Matt, because I'm looking forward to the next couple of games. I think Palace are wobbling a bit this season. We know that Leicester are struggling to pick up points, although, of course, there's going to be a little bit of additional colour, shall we say, to that match with Steve Cooper facing Forest for the first time since his departure from the City ground. So yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a Forest fan.
It certainly is. Right, let's get and talking of Bundesliga, actually, big shout out to our podcast mate Max Scott, who made his debut today, hosting his first very own show on TalkSport for
Really?
TalkSport 2.
Wow.
So big up to Max.
Congrats,
Great work. He's always flying the Forest flag, and he's brilliant. So would highly recommend you check out his show. You can listen back on the TalkSport website, and obviously hope to get Max on again very soon. Top man. Right.
It'll be nice. It'll be nice to have a show hosted by a very professional Max for a change. So the world needs more of that. So.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose they've got to beat that standing bloke. Was his? Yeah,
getting you back, my friend. Getting you back.
Forget that bloke's name that stood in while I was sunning it up in Turkey. Right, let's start. Come on, let's start rating some players rather than nattering away. And let's start really with the most important position on the pitch, the goalkeeper. And we start with Matt Sells, and we rate him. We were going to do A to F. We were going to do it old school, kind of GCSE A-level style. And Mark, you've done all your notes, but I've kind of thrown those out the window because we're going to do it between 1 to 10. Obviously, 1 being awful, as you can imagine, 10 being amazing. That's how we will do it on the scale. Matt Sells, I'll kick us off, and I will give Matt Sells a solid 9, particularly after his performance against Chelsea. I am one that has not criticised him, but questioned whether Forest should go out and get maybe a better goalkeeper. But I think Matt Sells is proving the doubters wrong every single game and has been a solid option for Forest. We talk about providing the stability last season, and he's certainly now providing the stability, in my opinion, so far this season. So a solid 9 for me. I don't think he's really done much wrong. What about you, Mark Turner?
Well, a couple of quick precursors. One is we should tell the listeners and viewers, if you're listening or viewing live, I'm not sure if this is going out live, but please, come back at us. Let us know what you think. And if you're hearing this after the fact, hit us up on the Twitters or, wherever. We'd be fascinated to hear people's takes on this. I have no player that's below 5. I have no player that secures a 10, but I have tried to stay away from half points, Max, because I wanted some delineation between the players. Mainly to drum up some conversation. So I think 9 is a great score for Sells. And I will say, I did consider going that direction myself. I ended up going with an 8. I think he had a couple of wobbles earlier in the season. I'm a big Matt Sells fan, so I don't feel like Forest need to, run to the bank and shell out on another goalkeeper for right now. I think he's, Belgian international, quality keeper, very assured. Had a little wobble earlier in the season. You're absolutely right. His game against Chelsea was his season high, without a doubt. He does a great job of commanding the defence. Happy to give him a solid 8. If I were doing fractions of points, I probably would go to an 8.5. But yeah, I think you and I are pretty closely aligned on that one.
Absolutely. And let's move on then and look at the other position of goalkeeper for Forest, Carlos Miguel, whose kind of only appearance, of course, against Newcastle in the Cup. And maybe this is slightly harsh, but I've gone with a 4 for him. I think I don't think his performance against Newcastle was great. I think you can tell Forest know that Matt Sells is currently the number 1. I think Carlos Miguel on the bench, of course, is still a good option to come on, but I just think the shaky start against Newcastle hasn't helped. And if Carlos Miguel was to start the next game against Crystal Palace, would I be worried? Probably. I just think he looked a little bit low on confidence. Maybe I'm being really harsh here, but I think he's a 4 out of 10 so far for me, Mark. Okay.
So generally speaking, we're just rating people here that have had Premier League appearances. We agree to include Miguel because we only have the one goalkeeper on the list, and he may be starting in the next game, right? There's a concern over Matt Sells and maybe being an injury worry. I had reservations about Miguel at the beginning of that Newcastle game. I was speculating on Twitter, and I kind of got some blowback for it, that he spilled the first shot that came in and looked very wobbly. I wouldn't say it's lack of confidence as such, Max. It just nervousness, new surroundings, new teammates, all the things. But I actually feel like he grew into that game, and I would be a little bit nervous about him starting in the next match just because Matt Sells is so assured. But it's not going to keep you up the night before. So I've given him a solid 6. I liked him, and I think there's more to come from him. So maybe a 6 is a little generous. Maybe the number's somewhere in the middle, Max. Maybe it should be a 5 from the both of us. But that's where I have him right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know whether you agree with me or Mark on a 6 or a 4 for Carlos Miguel. You can do that, of course, in the comment section. And if you are listening on
Such a small
Spotify,
sample size too, like one
yeah.
game. Well, yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, disclaimer, these are obviously ratings so far. This is us just being typical fans and typical pundits and the media. So, obviously feel free to have your say. And what you can do on Spotify now is you can comment on our episodes. So leave us your comments there with your numbers for players. Right, let's move on really to the back four and defence, an area where Forest have massively improved in recently. And you'd argue really have definitely all been above 5, at least in my opinion. Start with Murillo, and there's going to be no surprise here. I've given Murillo. I haven't, it's similar to you actually, Mark. I don't think I'm going to give anyone a 10, but I'm going to give Murillo a 9. And if I was going to push it, maybe a 9.5. I just think Murillo is Murillo, right? And we get kind of not sick and tired of praising him, but we talk about it a lot. And he has interest from Real Madrid and from Ajax and from Liverpool and Juventus, and you can simply understand why. Another solid start to the season. He controls the back line. He is soaring key performances against the likes of Chelsea, against the likes of Liverpool, where Forest have gone away to top 6 clubs and earned a point or 3. And he's controlled that back line. He looks like he slots in straight away, and he has no problem with facing top Premier League players. And he will go on to do... he'll go on to have an unbelievable career. So for me, Murillo is a 9. He could possibly even stretch to a 10. Yeah, I will always praise this man. Of course, he has his doubts at times, Mark. I know what you're going to say, but I think Murillo is Murillo, and if we lost him tomorrow, then we would see the issues maybe where Forest defensive line potentially, issues could occur, shall I say?
Well, that's high praise indeed. I mean, I've given him a 4. But I'm just kidding. We could lose him tomorrow. Omar Bamadeli could come in there. Wouldn't make any difference, mate. It'd still be fine. No, joking aside, Moreno obviously is a phenomenal young player, and he is attracting attention from across the Premier League, evidently, and even further afield, and rightly so. He has some great natural attributes. I think his courage is perhaps his best attribute. Despite the fact he can carry the ball out of defence, he obviously can pick a pass. I love any player who's prepared to throw his body in front of the ball, any body part. He'll take a ball to the face. He'll take one to the unmentionables. He'll do whatever it needs to do to keep the ball out of the goal. And I do love that about him. However, as I've said in previous episodes, I think also, he's inexperienced, and that's not a criticism, it's a reality. And so I think he finds himself in those positions of having to kind of throw his body in front of the ball because he's out of position, or he's been distracted, or he's got caught out doing something out the back that, we like to see, but occasionally can get him in trouble. And so I don't think he's definitely not the finished article. I think you'd agree with me on that. And I think there's been one defender this season who's actually been better than him. So in order to accommodate that higher rank, I've given Murillo an 8. Again, could possibly be a 9, certainly could be 8.5 if we were doing fractions. I'm not. I think an 8 is a fair score for him, and that leaves a little wiggle room as well. I certainly think he can get to a 10 this season, but 8 so far.
Yeah, we shall see. I guess that leads us quite nicely to talk about giving another player a high rating. I'm guessing that's Milenkovic, Mark.
The boy at the back, yes. Love me some Milenkovic, absolutely. Yeah, he's getting a solid 9 from me. And in fact, let me just check my numbers here, not to create spoilers for myself, but there's only 2 other players I've given that rating to. But yeah, I think Milenkovic has been almost flawless, Max. Certainly in defence, but of course he's contributed to offence as well, as we'd say here in America, recently with an assist for Chris Wood against Chelsea. But for the money we paid, an absolute steal. So yeah, love him to bits, deserves the 9.
I agree. I had him as a 9 as well. I mean, I can see
first
the argument.
We've agreed. It's the first time.
The first time we've agreed on everything. Yeah. Clip that. Right. Clip that. Get that out on socials, eh? So I think there's nothing more for me to add. Honestly, I just think the partnership between him and Murillo. There was some great comments from, I think Ian Wright actually mentioned it on the podcast you talked about just earlier, Mark, and he is just. I think for once you feel really confident with that back line for Forest, and particularly centre backs. I just don't feel worried anymore. That's no disrespect to Joe Worrell in the past, or to Balotelli, or to Steve Cook in the Premier League. But these were all solid defenders for Forest, and of course did a job. But I think this is an upgrade. This is a Premier League pairing, and I think that is evident, with the performances that they have had, which leads us quite nicely onto, another central defender that Forest haven't obviously played much, but he has featured a few times, and when he has done, he's done a good job. Moreno, I think a solid start for him. I'd rate him a 6.5, but that's because we haven't really seen much of him. We don't know too much. But again, if we were to lose Murillo tomorrow, if we were to lose Milenkovic due to injury or whatever, that player, Moreno, could step up. There's somebody else there. And Forest also have the likes of Balotelli still on the bench. We're not going to give him a rating in this one because he hasn't featured. But again, another decent enough central defender that Forest have brought in to replace Milenkovic or Murillo. What do you think, Mark, in terms of Moreno?
Yeah, so when you're picking these ratings, some of it, we talked about Miguel and how the sample size is one game, right? So, and that's probably why I maybe went a little generous with my 6 for him, because I felt like across the scope of that one game, I saw enough there to warrant a 6. When I think about Moreno, we have to work out how to say some of these names, Max. Is it Jota? Is it Jota? Anyway, you mentioned Balotelli, and the fact that Morato's coming off the bench ahead of him tells us something. Also, the fact that he's coming doing a very specific task, right? So again, we're looking at sample size. His sample size is essentially 10, 15, 20 minutes at the end of a game to come and ensure up the defense and get us across the line. He hasn't really put a foot wrong, or a head wrong for that matter. He's a unit. He's great in the air. He's been comfortable on the floor. He's winning his duels. I've been impressed with what we've seen of him. So I've gone ahead and given him a 7 on the basis of, is he a 7 in the same way some other players here are a 7 who have played more games? Probably not. But for what he's had to do, for the remit he's been given, I think he's done it well.
Absolutely, totally agree, and that moves us nicely onto Big Willy Boly. And again, don't. I
can't believe you said that. Clip that.
Get that clip, Dave. That's like a Dave Asprey. Dave did that when we were on a deadline day stream, and try not to laugh like a little kid, like a kid at school when you're learning about. Where are we going with
this? Move on,
move on, Max. Move on. Willy Boly. I'll give him a solid. I'll give him a solid 8, which is maybe quite high.
Give him a solid 8, huh? All right, cool, great.
Which is maybe quite high. Look how red we've both gone. We're almost as red as the logo.
A big, solid Willy gets an 8. All right, very good. I'm going to give him a 6. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's quickly move on. Professionalism, come on. Honestly, Willy Boly always provides cover for Forest, and you can always rely on him coming off the bench. So
I only gave him a 6 because I don't think we've seen that much of him, and he you know what you're going to get, right? He's robust. He has a little wobble in his game. 6 for me.
Yeah. Right. Moving on. Nico Williams. And again, Nico's Nico. What a man. And he also had a great international break for Wales. I don't know if you've seen his assist, but brilliant assist. Yeah. And I actually spoke to a few Welsh fans, and they were saying how much he's, just almost how he's improved as well under Craig Bellamy and the football that kind of he's playing, and they can notice a difference in his style of play. And I think Nico is one of those players that does seem to get better, particularly rather than worse or stay the same, which is great to see. And I think he's had another solid start to the season for me, for Forest, of course, providing, and I think with Nico, and I think we say this about Harry Toffolo, I think we say this about Morgan Gibbs-White, you feel like they're great servants off the pitch. You feel like you've almost brought them up in this Forest squad, and they're almost a bit of like an academy graduate. They're like a Yatesy, they're like a Joe Worrell was. They've always been quite a good servant for the club, and I particularly feel that way about Nico and Harry Toffolo. And and obviously a few other players. So, great for him. I think he deserves a lot of praise, and long may it continue for him.
Yeah, he's a player as well I've waxed lyrical about. Like you, I have a lot of time for Nico Williams. I think he was phenomenal last season. I'm not sure he's quite scaled those heights yet in a Forest shirt. Obviously played well for Wales this week. And also, I'm looking at ratings. I am looking at them in isolation. I'm looking at the individual, but you kind of have to also look at comparable players in that position, right? Which is why I said earlier, Moreno gets an 8. For me, Milenkovic gets a 9. I feel like there are two fullbacks that have hit the ground running and been more effective so far this season, but that's not to disparage Nico Williams, who I think is an important member of our squad and potentially the starting 11, as he, for me at least, as he fully gets up to speed. So with that said, I've given him a 7. Trevor's not going to be happy with that. Nico, I think, is one of his very favourite players, so I'm sure Trevor's screaming 9 at me right now, but I'm going with the 7 for Nico Williams. And again, just like with Murillo, more scope for growth.
Let's talk about other fullbacks then, and let's move on to Alex Moreno and what a start to the season. He was actually a player I was considering giving a 10, honestly. I think he's been brilliant. The way he's slotted in, his pace, his energy, enthusiasm, and to say this guy, no disrespect to 30-year-olds out there, but in football terms, he's over 30. A lot of Villa fans were a bit unsure. He's had career injuries. I think as long as Forest can keep him fit and keep him going, he will be an excellent player. And of course, I just think fullback and his work with, I think he's quite versatile in a way. Forest have, of course, played different formations this season without wingers, with wingers. And every time I've never had really any criticism for Alex Moreno. So I'm going to give him a 9. It's high again, but it's a good start to the season for Forest. And it's a good start for him.
We should post these ratings online when we get done. It just occurred to me. And that way people can really beat us up, because we always enjoy that, don't we? Getting dragged over the coals publicly. That's a great score, and it's a fair score.
Yeah.
I haven't given him a 9. I really toyed with doing it, and I feel bad for not doing it. But again, I'm sort of looking at other players and who I've given 9s to, and do I feel like he's had quite the season they've had? Do I think he's had quite the season that, for instance, Milenkovic has had? For me, he hasn't. Has he been a huge shot in the arm? 100%. He's a bloody good player, and I'm delighted he's in the Garibaldi. So I've given him an 8, only because when he's on the ball and he's in the game, I think he's probably our best fullback. But he has a tendency to drift out of games. And that I may be being really harsh there, because part of that probably isn't him drifting out. Part of it is the ball being on the other side of the field, or him just not being as heavily involved in the play at any given point in time. So he kind of flits in and out. But when he's in, my word, does he contribute. So I've given him a very, very high, solid 8, like on the cusp of a 9.
You're like one of those teachers in school that had never marked your homework that high because they're just quite harsh. Yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
You're lucky you don't have me as a college professor, that's for sure.
Yeah, God, I am. And yeah, I completely agree. Some good points there. I think you maybe been a little bit harsh about him dropping out, but opinions are different, right, Mark? We disagreed about James Ward-Prowse. You threw me under the bus on Twitter there, didn't you? Right, Ola Aina next. And again, we're talking about fullbacks, but I mean, he had a great season last season, and he's continuing to improve. I think David talks about it a lot when he comes on the podcast. When you watch the videos off the pitch of certain players and the way they are and their energy and enthusiasm, Ola Aina's enthusiasm is brilliant. It's amazing, and it must be great in the dressing room for the players. I think he actually hosted a private party or something a couple of days ago. I saw on social media.
It was great. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, did you? Oh, yeah. I didn't get the invite. Funny enough, honestly, must. Favoritism these days. I didn't get the invite, but Callum Hudson-Odoi, I think Morgan Gibbs-White was there, and Anthony Elanga did as well. That's on social media. So he just seems to be a player that's just full of energy, and you watch the videos that Forest release of day in the lives and things. And yeah, I think his energy transfers off the pitch, on the pitch. It's high. It's not as high as Alex Moreno. He's going to get an 8 from me. A solid, lovely 8.
I can't believe we're halfway through the list, and this is only the second time we've agreed on the number. So I just tell folks right out the gate, he also gets an 8 from me. I want to give him an 11. I absolutely love Ola Aina. I want to have his babies. Clip that. I just adore him. He just, in this day and age, Max, where football is so much about the business and the money and what have you done for me lately? It's no surprise that we hear so many instances of players and people in the industry struggling with their mental health and, kind of keeping their chin up and all. Everything's so commoditized, including people themselves. And to have someone in your team, in your club, who is so clearly a solid gold human being, first and foremost, means the world to me. And when I see players like him, aforementioned Nico, Yatesy, you mentioned Toff already, players that quite clearly are good people. It makes me so proud to have them in my club. For me, he's a lifer. Like, find a job for Ola Aina so he stays at the City Ground for the rest of his days. I don't care what he does, but he's got to be in and around the City Ground. He's absolutely brilliant. He's had another good start to his season. Gets an 8.
Absolutely. Do you know, it's funny. A lot of people, I think in a way that football is a bit different in human form, and you get like kids thinking, they're almost aliens to them in a way because they're so amazing and that celebrity status. But I think sometimes you just have to have characters in the dressing room. You have to have players with personalities, and I think Ola Aina is absolutely that. And honestly, brilliant. Totally.
And I'll be clear. The 8 he gets from me because of the player he is. I mean, phenomenal player. Had a great start to the season. Done very little wrong, but additionally, just delighted he plays for us.
Absolutely. And talking of someone else that you always want round a club, although Aussie Dave may disagree, the one and only Ryan Yates. And I'm always going to rate Ryan highly, right? I'm called the Ryan Yates lookalike, aren't I? So I've got to give him a high number. And it's not as high as others, but that's because Ryan Yates sometimes can go a little bit under the radar, and of course he has bad games and he is scapegoated at times by some of the fan base. Ryan Yates gets a solid 7 from me. Just being there, the way he breaks up play, winning the fouls away at Chelsea, getting in there. Ryan Yates wins fouls. He does what he does, and he continues to do it for Forest. So nothing more from me on him. Everyone knows how much I love him and how much I'll always praise him. So yeah, he gets a solid 7 from me. What about you, Mark?
You said it all, mate. The only thing I would add is for the Yatesy naysayers like David, is tell me what he's done wrong this season. He hasn't. I mean, he hasn't. Like, what you get with Ryan Yates. Yes, maybe his scope is more limited than some of his teammates, but he plays within it and he does it incredibly well. And he owned Enzo in that game against Chelsea. It was insane. Like, every aspect of the game. Like, he dominated the field. He won the fouls. He was more effective defensively and offensively. He's a vital piece of our team, and Yatesy gets an 8 from me.
Absolutely. Moving on to another player, Ibrahim Sangaré, who of course hasn't featured much for Forest, but one that splits opinion talking to Ryan Yates. Another one that of course does is Sangaré, and I'm going to sit on the fence here. This is typical presenter style for me, but I'm going to give him a 5.
I knew you would. I just knew you. I was just about to say it ahead of you. I knew exactly where you were going with that.
Well,
and that's fair. Keep going.
Yeah, and I think he is almost a bit of a, you flip the coin and you don't know what you're going to really get with him at the minute. And I think he is on that I just think that he's, I just wish that maybe he just needs to show more of what he can do. It's as simple as that. And maybe by getting a goal in the future will help him with the fan base. But he splits opinion. He is 50-50. It's hard really to give him a rating this season. There was a lot of talk last season about how bad he was. There was a lot of talk pre-season about how amazing he's going to be. And that's obviously tailed off. It's a bit of an interesting one. I don't know how you've gone with it, Mark.
I've gone in a very different direction. I was one of his biggest critics last season, and it wasn't because I think he's a bad player. It's because I think he wasn't living up to his promise. And I think you and your lot from the Twitch generation, you forget what happened yesterday, forget how Sangaré started this season. I think he was arguably our best midfielder at the beginning of the season. He and Morgan Gibbs-White. And yes, he's tailed off, and yes, he struggled with injury and everything else. But if you take those first few games, again, small sample size, and you say, what did he do wrong? Like, he was miles ahead of where he was last season. And finally, looking like he was getting to, be the player that we all thought Forest had signed, when it was a little over a year ago now. So I've gone, again, across the sample size, and I'm going to catch some heat for this, but I've gone with a 7. I have, based on that. Now, if you look at the season as a whole and say, okay, how would you rate him in terms of his impact on the season as a whole so far? That number drops to a 5. You're not wrong. But I don't think he did much wrong when he was out there and fit. I think he was on an upward trajectory. I think he deserves a 7.
You're one of these teachers that has favourites. I'm telling you now.
I can't win with you. I go too low, I get beat up. I go evidently too high, I catch heat. Good grief. You're one of those students who's always bloody complaining about it. Do the work, Hayes. Get your head down.
Yeah, and to be fair, my mum is a teacher, so I've always been taught never to
I love your
criticise the teachers.
I never met your mum.
Great.
Your old man is solid gold, but your mum sounds like she's cracking too. So I'm already on their side.
She is, yeah. She loves Forest. She only actually, I'm joking now. We always wind her up saying she only supported Forest when we started doing well. I'm just throwing my mum under the bus on a Nottingham Forest podcast. Sorry, mum, love you. Right, moving on, and let's talk about Elliot Anderson, a player that has, again, that transfer fee came with lots of criticism, of course, with PSR, and it being a bit of an odd scenario the way he joined Forest and his departure from Newcastle. I'm going to surprise people. I talked to you about going too high. I wasn't going to give anyone it, but I'm going to give, you're going to be shocked at this, I'm going to give Elliot Anderson a 10. I think he has done everything that the fans have asked so far. I think every game he's performed in, I think his energy, his enthusiasm, I can remember you talked about him being a bit of a mad puppy, but I think I like that. I like the way he kind of dominates the midfield and he kind of pushes up, and he's a versatile player. You can kind of play him in lots of different positions. He has done everything you want a Nottingham Forest player to do, and I think Anderson deserves a 10. He was he was almost came with his expectation. Dave was talking about it the other week. The same with Morgan, with the kind of price attached to him, with the situation surrounding him, and I just think honestly that Elliot Anderson has proved doubt as wrong, and I think he's had a really, really good start to the season.
Away the lad. Hey, gets himself a 10. That comment I made about Elliot Anderson kind of being like an overeager puppy, if you remember, that was very early doors. He was coming off the bench at that point, and he was kind of running around like a crazy man, trying to influence the game, trying to get stuck in. And I love seeing that. That wasn't a criticism. It was just an observation. I think subsequently he's found a spot in the starting 11 and he's calmed down. He's settled down. He's found his rhythm. I mentioned I gave a 9 to Milenkovic. He was one of only 3 players I've given a 9 to. Elliot Anderson is the second. I rate him every bit. Well, evidently not quite every bit, but almost as highly as you do. I think he has been quite possibly our most consistently influential midfielder so far this season. I pick my words very carefully there. Possibly most consistently. I'm not saying he's the best midfielder technically. I'm not saying he, necessarily has had the highest of high points so far this season. But if you look at somebody like if you're rating players, you look at what you give him every week for Forest. It's somewhere between 8 and 9. It's between an 8 and a 9 out of 10, just about every week. And he's starting now. You can see he's starting to get confidence as well. And we're starting to see that little bit of flair he has, right? The flicks and the turns, but he seems to be doing them in the right places on the field as well to really contribute to moving the team up the field and engage in creating offensive opportunities. So solid 9 from me.
Absolutely. And let's talk about another player that comes off the bench and does a job for Forest. He hasn't started many games, but Nicola Dominguez. And I think Dominguez gets a 7 for me. Yes, it's high again, but you talk about what's Ryan Yates done wrong this season. What's Nicola Dominguez done wrong this season? Because I can't really think of much. Solid player. There's nothing really else for me to say. He deserves praise and he deserves a 7. He comes into the Forest side and he does a job. I can remember we used to talk about Steve Cooper and the next man up mentality. Well, this is exactly what a next man up mentality is at the minute with the Forest team. And you feel like Dominguez isn't a player that complains, even though he's not starting games. And when he gets the chance to come on, he wears the he wears the Garibaldi red with pride.
Yeah, I'm sure he's complaining behind the scenes, Max.
Probably.
It's difficult because there's a few of these players, right? So we talked earlier about Moreno, we talked about Willy Boly, Dominguez. I think they're all in that 6/7 range, which is less of a reflection on what they've done and more of a reflection on the sample size. It's difficult to strike that right balance. So I have him down as a 6, not because I think he could very easily be a 7. I don't disagree with you, but not because I think he's done anything bad, just because I don't think he's done very much. And it was interesting. I was looking at the sample size for him and for Sangaré and saying, okay, who do I feel like have more of an impact over the few games that they've engaged in so far? And for me, Sangaré fractionally more, which is why I gave him the 7 and Dominguez the 6. But you could flip those numbers; they could both be 6s, both be 7s. As much of a muchness, but certainly he hasn't let Forest down, and he is a good option off the bench.
Absolutely. Let's talk about James Ward-Prowse and, of course, that controversial second yellow, which split opinion between many people. And I think James Ward-Prowse deserves praise again. I think I've got to give him. I think I've got to give him a 7. Maybe falls to a 6.5, a 6. I kind of had this discussion with I was about to say with my old man, but that's a bit harsh, with my dad the other week. And he was talking about, I feel like James Ward-Prowse sometimes goes missing. And maybe that's because he goes missing in a bit of a good way, because he does the work that people don't notice, and he cleans up those areas in midfield that simply need, working on, and it helps Forest in terms of the transition of play. So, yeah, I think James Ward-Prowse is a player that has got a lot to prove still, because he's a bit of a name and everyone talks about him being the best set piece taker in England. And that's probably difficult because he's having to live up to expectation, but he deserves praise. He's a Premier League player and he's slotted quite nicely into the Forest side. And who'd have thought that we'd have James Ward-Prowse a year ago? It's just a brilliant name to have that you can, bring on or obviously start, which he's done a lot of under Nuno recently.
Yeah, I think you and I, this is the third time we're agreeing. I'd also give him a 7 as well. I really have nothing to add to what you said. And in fact, you're not going to
give him a 9 for that unbelievable second yellow mark where he handballs it.
It was brilliant, and you're wrong about that. I'm just going to leave it at that. You said something when you actually nailed it in one sentence. You said he has, you said he has more to prove, or he has something to prove. Either way, that's it in a nutshell. He's done well so far. There's scope for more. We'll see more from James Ward-Prowse. 7 for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Forest's star man, Morgan Gibbs-White. If I'm giving Elliot Anderson a 10, do I have to give Morgan a 10? No, because I think we know how much, Forest rely on Morgan Gibbs-White. He gets a 9. Yeah, I think Elliot Anderson deserves the 10, given the situation surrounding him when he signed. Morgan has obviously been at the club a lot longer, and he just continues to be Morgan Gibbs-White. He continues to be an absolutely influential player for Forest on and off the pitch. And of course, in the dressing room, players will look up to him. He's a leader. He's in that kind of top hierarchy. So for me, Morgan gets a 9. That's it, really. Hopefully he's going to be back for the Crystal Palace game. Slightly worried about the injury there. But yeah, and to say he got an England call-up as well, yeah, he deserves praise.
Let's circle back to Elliot Anderson very quickly, because we both gave him his flowers, but you gave him a 10. In order to get a 10, doesn't he need to have contributed to assists or maybe scored goals?
I think Elliot Anderson deserves the 10, given people's reaction when he signed, right? I think it's so hard sometimes when you sign a player and the fans are not on your back. And I'm not saying that Forest fans were criticising him straight away, but there was a little bit, 35 million or has he just been signed in a PSR deal? So he had a lot to prove. And yes, he might have not contributed to goals and assists, but he's proved a lot still in this Forest side. And if you gave Elliot Anderson the captain's armband now, I think the players would respect Elliot Anderson. I think he could do a job as captain. I think that tells you everything you need to know. I think he's put himself in a great position in the Forest dressing room.
You'd be mad to do that though, because if you
disagree.
get the armband out, you give it to Milenkovic.
Yeah, but I'm just using that as a kind of a phrase. I'm just using that as a bit
I
of,
see what you're saying. Okay, yeah,
as an example to show.
I just feel like
how
if there's room to grow, like in the second half of the season, let's say Anderson contributes to, gets 5 assists and 5 goals, you can't give him an 11.
Well, no, because we're only rating players between 1 and 10 more.
All right, Morgan Gibbs-White.
I can hear that voice in your head going, that's his job about, the Roy Keane voice.
Something like that. But Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm going to give an 8, which, again, I'm probably going to catch heat over. He's Forest's jewel in the crown. Yes, he's an England international now. But I think his season has been in fits and bursts. I actually don't think he played particularly well against Chelsea. I know he got the injury and everything, but I think there have been games where he's vanished is too strong of a word, but dipped in and out. There's been games where he's been highly influential, and that's kind of it with Morgan. I think. I think what you've heard from lots of great players in the past or managers in the past who have coined a phrase or similar phrases around the idea of the best players in the world aren't the best; they're the most consistent. Yes, they're the best as well, right? I mean, like Messi is one of the best players to ever play the game because A, he's phenomenal, but B, he's phenomenal consistently. Like almost every game he shows up. And we need to see a bit more of that from Morgan. And so that's why I guess I'm marking him down on an 8. But also by comparison to Anderson, I mentioned earlier, Anderson I think has been the best consistent midfielder so far this season. So I could hardly give them the same score. So 8 for me for Morgan Gibbs-White, but I expect a 10 by the end of the season.
Yeah, we move on and let's look at Callum Hudson-Odoi, and I will keep this short and sweet. Again, Callum gets a 9. He gets I'm just full of praise for Callum Hudson-Odoi. I was talking to a mate the other day, and he was on about Forest's start to the season and it being a bit of a surprise. And I said, well, actually, when you look at the squad on paper, particularly in the final third, is it a surprise that Forest have scored? I think it's third highest in the Premier League. We've created, the near enough the most chances in the Premier League. Is it a surprise? And his answer was, well, kind of no, actually, because you look at that squad on paper in the final third, you've got Callum Hudson-Odoi, Anthony Elanga, Chris Wood. That's a solid final 3. And you've obviously got, as I knock my microphone out of my hand because I'm so excited talking about him, but you obviously get Morgan Gibbs-White behind and linking up with them and whatnot with that final 3. So I don't think it's a surprise. And Callum Hudson-Odoi is just, he's coming on leaps and bounds. He's improving every game. To say that Forest paid such a small fee for him and we are seeing the rewards now of that small fee, brilliant to see. And again, a player that will probably be linked with many clubs in the next couple of months, Mark. Yeah,
no, I agree with you 100%. Great player. Don't quite line up on the score. I'm giving him an 8 because I think there's more to come from him. But yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said. And certainly of our 2 typically starting wide men, he has been the best so far this season.
Absolutely. Let's talk about someone before we get on to Anthony Elanga. We look at someone that's been on the fringe players and had that brilliant cup game. Because obviously we're going to include a little bit of the cup.
The man who's going to be your first Forest tattoo. I can see it coming. It's going to be on your arm. Jota, baby.
Jota Silva. What a man. I just, do you know what? I give him an 8 and I give him an 8, which might be, again, really high. I mean, I have rated Forest players highly, but it's been a great start to the season.
You're in love with him. He is your Ola Aina.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just like that he's a bit of a, I'm going to say it, bleep it out if you want, producer Dan, but he's got that shithousery about him, right? Sorry for swearing, but honestly, he has. And he's like, honestly, I know the looks are a bit like him, but he's a little bit like Jack Grealish in a way of he kind of winds people up. And I just think his energy and the way he kind of, I thought a brilliant clip was, I can't remember, I think it could have been against Brighton where he kind of quickly gets the ball and he's eager to go. And yeah, I just think his energy is so high. And obviously that performance against Newcastle, great goal and his assists and everything like that. Yeah, I honestly think he's brilliant and I think he's only going to get better for Forest.
Yeah, he is brilliant. I've given him a 7, which is it kind of feels a little harsh because, again, if we're looking at the sample size, it's very small. And within the sample size, he's probably worth an 8. But I've given him a 7 because I gave Callum an 8, and Callum has, contributed more this season. I love Jota too. What I love most about him is I love the speed with which he attacks things. And you just kind of referred to that, right? Picking up the ball and wanting to go. But he does this in everything he does. I love players for whom, when they have to take a first touch, they shorten the distance between the first touch and the second touch and make it really difficult to mark or to close down. And he operates like that. He just is. He's just so frenetic, and you never know what you're going to get from him. And I certainly want to see more of him in the second half of the season. He's a player that, intrigues me enormously. So 7 for me.
Absolutely. Do you know, we've been talking for 45 minutes and you forget how big this Forest squad is. I'm supposed to be meeting a mate for tea, and I've just had to text him to say, hold fire. I'm still on the podcast.
4 more to go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's bring this home, Max.
We haven't got long. Right, let's rattle through them, and let's talk about Anthony Elanga. Again, similar to Callum, not much to talk about. I think he's got to do a little bit more for me in terms of I'm going to give him a 7, which might be really harsh, but yeah,
harsh?
I can.
Good grief, that's generous.
Oh, what you think that's generous, Mark? I mean,
I'm going with a 5.
Wow,
he's one of 2 players on my list who get a 5.
Why?
Because he hasn't done anything. Like, the minimum you expect from Anthony Elanga is for him to run around like a headless chicken, right? And to use his speed and be a flat track bully. He's done all of that. I need more than that. I need assists. I need goals. I need him to terrorize defenses, not just turn it on every now and then and give the fullback something to think about. He's not been as good as Callum Hudson-Odoi. He's arguably not been as good as Jota so far in terms of kind of how he's gotten people off their seats and, what he's brought to games. Don't get me wrong. I love Elanga, and similarly to Callum Hudson-Odoi, I'm delighted that he plays for us. But we've got to see more from him, and we've got to see it more often.
Yeah, for once, actually, you've changed my opinion. I agree. See, football is full of opinions. They can change.
Why don't we both go with the 6? Maybe I was a little harsh at 5. You were a little heavy at 7.
Okay,
we'll give it a 6. All right.
Let's meet in the middle with a 6. Let's talk about Ramon Sosa. And again, similar to Jota, I like his energy. He's got to do a little bit more for me. Mm-hmm. I will give him a 6.
Me
there's
too.
Kind of nothing more to add about that.
Yeah.
You agree, Mark?
Yeah, for exactly the same reason. Like, if I'm going to give Jota a 7, I can't give Sosa a 7. I don't think he's done as much as Jota. Yes, he got his goal, but where did it come from? And it was a tap-in, essentially, right? And yes, he had to be there for it, but he had an opportunity later in that game to score another that was a bit more difficult, and he didn't. So, no, I think there's a lot to come from him, but for right now, it's a 6.
Absolutely. Let's talk about a player, Taiwo Awoniyi, and I'm gonna give Taiwo a 3, sadly, which is really low. And
Max is not going to be walking the streets of Nottingham at night anytime soon.
I think
in case he bumps into Taiwo.
I think Taiwo has obviously had a bit of a difficult start to the season. And if we're talking about it being off the pitch, but on the pitch, I just think he's got to show more. And I just think that he's not the player he used to be. And of course, that's because of fitness and injuries. I just wonder whether Forest start to question in the next few games, and particularly with the, I know it feels like a long time away, but it'll be soon Christmas, it'll be soon January. The dark nights are drawing in. And we talk about maybe selling possibly players in January. Is Taiwo a player that Forest look at to potentially get rid of? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. And that will probably happen if Forest bring in another striker in January. I don't think they're going to get rid of him and just rely on Chris Wood and hope for the best and play Jota Silva up front if it all goes wrong. I just think Taiwo has to do more, and it has been a really disappointing start for the season. He doesn't look lively to me. He doesn't look energetic, and he doesn't. I hate to say it, but half the time I don't think he looks interested. That is me being harsh. There will be people that will completely disagree with me. I think Taiwo gets a 3, maybe a 4.
Sorry, I was just texting my colleague for whom I'm supposed to be meeting here in a few minutes. We have a theme, don't we, for this podcast? Okay, so I don't
We're
disagree
on
with
tight
anything you said
schedules.
about Taiwo. I don't disagree with anything you said, and I think he could get sold in January. But I agree with you only if we have somebody already in the door. Otherwise, I think it'd be foolish to let him go. God, who thought we'd ever be saying this? He's a good understudy to Chris Wood right now. Oh, we're in the upside down here, mate. This is Stranger Things territory. But that's how it is. I originally gave him a 5. I'm looking at it now thinking I'm a bit too generous because I gave Alanga a 5. And despite the fact that Alanga hasn't contributed much this season, he's contributed more than Taiwo has. So maybe a 4 is an accurate number. Sounds like you're bringing yourself up to a 4. So again, maybe you have one of those situations where that's where you and I meet. We do need to see more from him. We have to understand there have been extenuating circumstances on and off the field. And we know there's more from Taiwo. We've seen the best of Taiwo. We'll never forget he was, the first Premier League goal scorer for us on our return. And we know what he can do, what he's capable of. And I hope we see that before the end of the season. I think we need to see it before the end of the transfer window, or I suspect he might not be a Forest player come the spring.
Yeah, we've been nattering on for that long. My lovely light, which shines a bit of light onto my face. There we go. It's back. It's gone off.
All right.
Right.
Come on, last one.
We're on the last one. Chris Wood. Chris Wood gets an 8 for me. He scores goals. Ronaldo's got pictures of him on his wall. Chris Wood is Chris Wood. And who'd have thought that he'd be leading the line for Forest? I massively criticised him at the start of his career. But boy, without Chris Wood, we will be in trouble. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, we've name-checked a few players, haven't we, who we really like them, like we like their character, and we like them as a player, right? We talked about Williams and Aina and Yates and MG Dub, and Chris Wood has very quietly become a Forest folk hero. He is. Like, when he hangs up his boots or gets sold or whatever happens, I hope Forest fans don't have short memories. I hope they remember, as you just pointed out, just how important he has been to our team these last couple of years. I mentioned there were 3 players I'd given a 9 to. It was Milenkovic, it was Anderson, and I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud. Chris Wood gets a 9 from me. He's done almost nothing wrong. He's had a couple of scuffs in front of goal. But again, he's been so vital to the start of our season. And I love him to bits. He has grown on me enormously. I was never a Chris Wood hater, but I am very much a Chris Wood lover now. 9 from me.
Absolutely. There we go. Got there in the end. 52 minutes. Wipe the sweat off your face. We have done it. Do you know, I could have ran the half marathon quicker than this. There we go. Football full of opinions. Let us know what you think. Remember, this is just ratings so far.
Wait. What's Nuno's score?
10 out of 10. Genuinely, I don't think Nuno could have had a better start. Genuinely, 10 out of 10 for me. Maybe drops down to a 9 out of 10 because he didn't bring James Ward-Prowse off when he knew he was on a yellow. That was poor in game management for me. Maybe he comes down to a 9 out of 10. Right, that's it, Mark.
9 out of 10 from me. 9 out of 10 from me.
The klaxon's going. I can hear it now. I've got a Wagamama's calling with a mate. Wagamama's, if you want to sponsor us, you know where we are. Right, that does us nicely. We shall see you towards the end of this week with a Crystal Palace preview. Of course, Monday night, so it's a bit funny with our main episode. And then we've got a busy week with Leicester away on the Friday night. So we shall see you when we see you. And appreciate all the comments recently and all the feedback. Keep liking, keep sharing, keep disagreeing or agreeing with me and Mark. And we shall see you soon from me and Mark. Come on, you Reds. Mark, do you know what? For a great start to the season on Garibaldi Reds, I'm going to give you a 5. Bye-bye.